What if everything you've been taught about kindness is making you weaker? What if the very qualities that were supposed to earn you respect, being understanding, forgiving, patient, and always available, are actually the reason people take you for granted? It's a disturbing idea, yet if someone looks honestly at their own life, they may begin to notice a pattern. The people who sacrifice the most are often appreciated the least. The people who explain themselves endlessly are rarely respected, and the people who desperately seek acceptance usually find themselves controlled by the opinions of others. Now, this doesn't mean becoming evil, heartless, or cruel in the way most people imagine. That's where the greatest misunderstanding begins. Machiavelli never suggested that a person should become a monster. He suggested something far more dangerous, becoming impossible to manipulate. Because the world has a strange habit of rewarding strength while testing weakness. It doesn't matter how good someone's intentions are. If they cannot protect themselves, establish boundaries, and control their emotions, sooner or later they become vulnerable to exploitation. Here's the uncomfortable truth that most self-help advice avoids. The world does not crush people because they are kind. It crushes them because they are defenseless. There's a massive difference. A lion can be calm without becoming prey. A king can be merciful without surrendering authority. And a person can be compassionate without allowing others to walk all over them. The secret lies in developing a form of controlled ruthlessness, a psychological power rooted in self-mastery rather than aggression. Throughout this journey, you'll discover why emotional detachment is often misunderstood, why strategic silence can be more powerful than endless arguments, why validation is one of the most dangerous addictions a person can develop, and how the Machiavellian mindset can help transform pain, rejection, and betrayal into strength. More importantly, you'll learn how to stop being emotionally available to everyone while becoming emotionally owned by no one. Because once a person understands these principles, something remarkable happens. They stop asking for respect and start commanding it naturally. They stop chasing approval and start creating value. They stop fearing rejection and start seeing it as information. And perhaps most importantly, they stop being easy to break. The question is, are they ready to let go of the weak version of themselves before the world does it for them? There comes a moment in a person's life when they realize that being nice hasn't brought them peace, respect, or security. They've spent years trying to please everyone, avoiding conflict, and making themselves available whenever others needed them. Yet somehow, they're the ones left exhausted, overlooked, and taken for granted. Psychology reveals a hard truth. People often value what has boundaries and lose respect for what is endlessly available. A person without limits becomes predictable. And predictability, as Machiavelli understood well, often invites exploitation rather than appreciation. Many people confuse kindness with weakness, but they are not the same thing. A genuinely kind person can say no, walk away, and defend their dignity when necessary. A weak person feels guilty for doing those things. That's where the trap begins. They tolerate disrespect because they fear rejection. They remain silent when they should speak, and speak when they should remain silent. This lack of self-mastery slowly trains others to see them as someone whose needs can always come second. The world doesn't usually announce this process. It happens quietly, one compromise at a time. Imagine someone who constantly cancels their own plans whenever a friend calls. At first, it looks generous, but after months or years, people begin expecting that sacrifice. What was once appreciated becomes assumed. The friend no longer sees generosity. They see availability. This is one of the hidden lessons within the Machiavellian mindset. Value increases when a person respects their own time first. The moment someone begins protecting their priorities, others suddenly become aware that access to them is no longer unlimited. Strange, isn't it? People often notice value only when it stops being freely given. The strongest individuals understand something that most never learn. Emotional detachment is not the absence of feelings. It's the ability to feel deeply without becoming controlled by those feelings. When criticism arrives, they don't collapse. When praise arrives, they don't become addicted to it. They remain centered, like a tree with deep roots during a storm. They bend but don't break. Psychological power begins the moment a person stops allowing every opinion, rejection, or disappointment to dictate their emotional state. Years ago, many successful leaders discovered that emotional control often mattered more than talent. Two people can face the exact same insult. One reacts instantly, argues, and loses control. The other remains calm, observes, and responds only if necessary. Who appears stronger? The answer is obvious. Strategic silence frequently communicates more authority than emotional reactions ever could. In psychology, restraint creates intrigue and respect because it signals confidence. A person who controls themselves becomes difficult to control by others. This awakening is uncomfortable because it forces someone to admit that their greatest vulnerability may not be other people, it may be their own need to be liked. That's the painful realization many spend years avoiding. Yet, once they begin seeing this pattern, a new question naturally emerges. If approval-seeking creates weakness, then where should all that emotional energy go instead? And that's where the next transformation quietly begins. One of the most important turning points in a person's life happens when they stop asking, "Why don't they appreciate me?" and start asking, "Why am I investing so much in people who clearly don't value me?" That single shift changes everything. Many individuals spend years pouring time, attention, loyalty, and emotional energy into relationships that only take and never give back. They keep hoping that more effort will eventually create appreciation. But psychology teaches a different lesson. People rarely respect what they can endlessly consume without consequence. The more someone gives without standards, the more invisible their sacrifices often become. What's fascinating is that emotional dependence rarely introduces itself honestly. It doesn't arrive wearing a label that says, "I'm afraid of being alone." Instead, it disguises itself as kindness, loyalty, patience, and understanding. A person tells themselves they're being generous when, deep down, they're terrified of losing someone's approval. Machiavelli understood that hidden motivations often control behavior more than visible actions. This is why self-mastery begins with brutal honesty. A person must learn to ask themselves whether they're helping because they truly want to, or because they're afraid of what will happen if they stop. Consider someone who constantly checks their phone, waiting for a message from a person who rarely responds. Their mood rises when a notification appears and drops when silence follows. In that moment, they've unknowingly handed control of their emotional state to someone else. That's not love. That's dependency disguised as attachment. The Machiavellian mindset teaches that power always follows ownership. Whoever controls a person's emotions controls part of their life. The solution isn't becoming cold or heartless. It's learning emotional detachment so that affection becomes a choice rather than a necessity. Pain itself carries a strange gift that most people never unwrap. Betrayal, rejection, humiliation, and disappointment often reveal truths that comfort never could. A trusted friend breaks loyalty. A relationship collapses unexpectedly. An opportunity disappears after years of effort. In those moments, life removes illusions. Psychology shows that difficult experiences force adaptation because they expose weaknesses that success often hides. While most people focus only on the suffering, the wise quietly search for the lesson hidden beneath it. Many powerful individuals were shaped more by rejection than acceptance. They used criticism as information, not as a verdict. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" they asked, "What can this teach me?" That small difference transforms pain into psychological power. A setback becomes training. An insult becomes data. A betrayal becomes clarity. The energy once spent on resentment gets redirected into growth, discipline, and purpose. Funny enough, the people who hurt them often become accidental contributors to their success. As emotional energy is withdrawn from ungrateful people, something unexpected begins to happen. Focus returns. Confidence returns. Clarity returns. The person who once chased validation starts investing in themselves instead. Yet an even deeper challenge waits ahead. Because after someone stops seeking appreciation from others, they must confront a more uncomfortable habit: the constant need to explain themselves, justify their choices, and make sure everyone understands them. And that habit can be just as dangerous as dependence itself. Before we go further, Think about what you've heard so far. If you've realized how much power is lost through approval seeking, emotional dependence, and investing your energy in the wrong people, then you need to understand the hidden signals that shape how others see you. That's exactly why I created the Silent Influence Code. Inside, you'll discover the psychological cues that influence trust, respect, and perception. Inspired by timeless Machiavellian principles and modern psychology. If you're ready to stop being overlooked and start building real influence, click the link in the pinned comment and get your copy now. One of the most liberating lessons a person can learn is that not everyone needs to understand them. Yet for many people, this idea feels almost impossible to accept. They spend enormous amounts of energy explaining their decisions, defending their intentions, and trying to correct every misunderstanding. They want others to see their good heart, recognize their effort, and validate their choices. But psychology reveals a paradox. The more someone desperately seeks understanding, the less authority they often project. Constant explanations can unintentionally communicate uncertainty, as if their decisions require permission from the audience around them. Think about how often people justify themselves over small things. They explain why they declined an invitation, why they changed a goal, why they ended a relationship, or why they chose a different path in life. Most of the time, those explanations aren't given to inform others. They're given to avoid disapproval. That's where the hidden trap exists. Machiavelli observed that power is weakened when a person becomes overly concerned with managing the opinions of everyone around them. The moment someone feels obligated to explain every move, they surrender part of their freedom to the judgment of others. Powerful individuals understand a different principle. They know that clarity is valuable, but endless justification is costly. When they make a decision, they communicate it when necessary and move forward. They don't spend hours trying to convince every critic, doubter, or skeptic. This is where self-mastery begins separating itself from people-pleasing. A person who trusts their own judgment doesn't need universal agreement. In fact, they become increasingly comfortable knowing that some people will misunderstand them, no matter how carefully they explain themselves. And, surprisingly, that acceptance creates confidence rather than anxiety. There is also a unique form of psychological power hidden inside mystery. Human nature is naturally curious. When everything is explained, analyzed, and revealed, curiosity disappears. But when a person becomes more reserved, people begin filling the silence with their own assumptions. That's why strategic silence has been used by leaders, negotiators, and influential figures throughout history. Silence creates space. Space creates curiosity. Curiosity creates attention. The individual who doesn't rush to reveal every thought often becomes far more intriguing than the one who constantly seeks to be understood. Consider two people facing criticism. One immediately launches into a long defense, trying to prove they're right. The other listens calmly, says very little, and continues moving toward their goals. Which person appears more secure? Usually the second, not because they're always correct, but because they aren't emotionally dependent on winning every argument. Emotional detachment allows them to separate their identity from the opinions being thrown at them. They understand that criticism is temporary, while their mission is long-term. That's a level of control most people never develop. Eventually, a person reaches a stage where being misunderstood no longer feels like a threat. They stop chasing approval through explanations and start letting their actions speak louder than their words. The Machiavellian mindset recognizes that reputation is built through consistent behavior, not endless self-defense. Yet once someone stops seeking validation through understanding, another challenge quietly emerges. They must learn how to protect their energy, strengthen their boundaries, and stop confusing attachment with genuine loyalty. And that lesson changes everything that follows. One of the fastest ways a person loses respect for themselves is by begging for what should be given freely. They beg for attention, for affection, for loyalty, for explanations, and sometimes even for basic respect. The tragedy is that most don't realize they're doing it. They call it persistence, commitment, or fighting for the relationship. But psychology often reveals something deeper beneath the surface. Fear. Fear of abandonment. Fear of being alone. Fear of accepting that someone has already made their choice. The harder they chase, the more they communicate that their peace depends on someone else's response. Many people believe closure comes from another person finally providing the perfect explanation. They wait for one last conversation, one final message, or one magical sentence that will make everything make sense. Yet real self-mastery teaches a harsher truth. Closure is rarely given. It is created. Sometimes the answer is silence. Sometimes the answer is disappointment. Sometimes the answer is seeing someone's actions contradict their words. Waiting endlessly for closure places emotional control in another person's hands. Emotional independence begins when a person decides they no longer need permission to move forward. This is where many confuse loyalty with attachment. Loyalty is a conscious choice based on values, trust, and mutual respect. Attachment is often driven by fear, dependency, or emotional habit. A loyal person can walk away when necessary without betraying themselves. An attached person remains even when staying causes harm. Machiavelli understood that blind devotion creates vulnerability because it disconnects people from reality. The Machiavellian mindset encourages observing actions rather than becoming hypnotized by emotional investments. Reality always tells the truth, even when emotions try to rewrite the story. Imagine a castle without walls. Anyone can enter. Anyone can take what they want. Anyone can leave destruction behind. Most people would never call that a secure fortress, yet many treat their personal lives exactly that way. They allow disrespectful behavior repeatedly, forgive broken promises without accountability, and tolerate treatment they would never recommend to a friend. Boundaries function like the walls of that castle. They don't exist to keep everyone out. They exist to protect what matters inside. Psychological power grows every time a person reinforces those walls with consistency. Healthy boundaries are often misunderstood because they make some people uncomfortable. When someone stops answering every demand, stops tolerating disrespect, or starts prioritizing their own well-being, others may accuse them of changing. And they're right, they have changed. Strategic silence becomes useful here because not every boundary requires a lengthy explanation. Sometimes a simple no is enough. Sometimes distance communicates a message more effectively than an argument ever could. The strongest boundaries are enforced through action rather than endless discussion. Over time, emotional detachment transforms from a difficult skill into a natural state. The person no longer feels compelled to chase what is leaving or cling to what is unstable. They become comfortable standing alone when necessary because their sense of worth no longer depends on external approval. But as powerful as boundaries are, there is an even more subtle form of strength waiting ahead. It involves knowing when to speak, when to remain silent, and how loyalty itself can become either a source of wisdom or a dangerous weakness. And that distinction is where true influence begins to emerge. Most people underestimate silence because they confuse it with passivity. They assume that the loudest voice controls the room, that the fastest response wins the argument, and that immediate reactions demonstrate strength. Yet psychology often points in the opposite direction. The person who can remain composed while everyone else is emotionally exposed possesses a rare advantage. They observe while others reveal. They listen while others overshare. They learn while others perform. Machiavelli understood that information is power, and silence is often the safest container for power. There is a reason why emotional reactions frequently create regret. Anger demands immediate action. Pride demands defense. Fear demands reassurance. But emotions are impatient advisors. They want decisions made in moments that should be handled with reflection. Strategic silence interrupts this process. It creates a gap between stimulus and response. Within that gap lives self-mastery. The individual who pauses before reacting gains access to something that emotional people rarely possess: choice. And choice is where true strength begins. Consider a workplace disagreement, a family conflict, or even an online argument. One person reacts instantly, firing back with frustration and trying to win the exchange. Another remains calm, gathers information, and responds only when necessary. Days later, the first person is still defending themselves, while the second has already moved on with their goals intact. That's psychological power in action. It isn't about domination through force. It's about maintaining control over oneself when everyone else is losing control over themselves. Silence also creates an unexpected effect on human behavior. People often reveal more when they aren't interrupted. In conversations, negotiations, and conflicts, many individuals become uncomfortable with quiet moments. They rush to fill the space. They explain more than they intended. They disclose motivations, fears, and intentions without realizing it. The Machiavellian mindset recognizes this tendency. A carefully placed silence can reveal more truth than a dozen aggressive questions. Sometimes the person saying less learns the most. Loyalty follows a similar principle. Many people give loyalty indiscriminately, believing that commitment itself is a virtue. But loyalty without judgment becomes vulnerability. History is filled with examples of individuals who trusted blindly and paid a heavy price. Strategic loyalty is different. It is earned through consistency, character, and shared values. Emotional detachment helps here because it prevents a person from confusing emotional attachment with genuine trust. Loyalty should strengthen a person's position, not expose them to unnecessary risk. As these lessons begin to merge, a remarkable transformation occurs. Silence becomes a source of influence. Restraint becomes a source of confidence. Selective loyalty becomes a source of protection. The individual no longer feels compelled to react, explain, or attach themselves to everyone who enters their life. Yet there is still one final stage beyond all of this. A stage where approval loses its power, manipulation loses its effectiveness, and a person becomes something few ever achieve: truly untouchable. There comes a point in a person's evolution when they realize that the greatest battle was never against difficult people, unfair circumstances, or betrayal. It was against their own impulses, their need to be accepted, their fear of rejection, their habit of seeking comfort instead of growth. Most people spend their lives trying to control the world around them, while remaining strangers to themselves. But true self-mastery begins when a person turns inward and develops authority over their own mind. That is where lasting power is born. Not in dominance over others, but in sovereignty over oneself. The average person can be manipulated through predictable emotional triggers. Praise influences them. Criticism destabilizes them. Rejection controls them. Approval motivates them. Their emotional state rises and falls depending on what happens around them. Psychology teaches that external dependence creates internal weakness. The stronger a person's need for validation, the easier they become to influence. The moment they stop outsourcing their worth to the opinions of others, however, a profound shift begins. Their center of gravity moves inward, and once that happens, manipulation starts losing its grip. Imagine two ships facing the same storm. One has a strong anchor buried deep beneath the water. The other drifts wherever the waves decide to take it. Life treats people in much the same way. Challenges are inevitable. Losses are inevitable. Criticism is inevitable. The difference lies in whether a person has built an internal foundation strong enough to withstand them. Emotional detachment serves as that anchor. It doesn't remove emotions. It prevents emotions from becoming the captain of the ship. That distinction changes everything. Many spend years believing psychological power comes from status, money, influence, or recognition. Those things can certainly amplify power, but they cannot create it. Real power exists when a person can remain calm while others panic, when they can walk away from disrespect without needing revenge, when they can hear criticism without becoming defensive, when they can succeed without becoming arrogant and fail without becoming broken. Machiavelli repeatedly emphasized adapting to reality rather than wishing reality were different. The strongest individuals learn to do exactly that. The Machiavellian mindset is often misunderstood because people focus only on strategy and overlook discipline. Yet strategy without discipline collapses under pressure. Knowledge without emotional control becomes useless when challenges arrive. Strategic silence, restraint, patience, and observation are not merely techniques. They become part of a person's identity. They stop reacting impulsively because they no longer need to prove anything. Their confidence comes from evidence accumulated through experience rather than approval borrowed from others. Eventually, a person reaches a state that appears almost mysterious to those around them. They cannot be easily manipulated because they don't crave validation. They cannot be easily exploited because they enforce boundaries. They cannot be easily broken because they transform pain into growth. They move through life with quiet certainty, guided by self-mastery rather than emotion, by awareness rather than impulse, and by purpose rather than approval. And once someone reaches that level of inner strength, the entire journey suddenly takes on a deeper meaning, one that reveals why the world treats the weak and the strong so differently. If there's one lesson to take away from everything you've heard today, it's this: the world changes the moment a person stops asking for permission to become strong. Not strong through anger, not strong through intimidation, strong through self-mastery, through the ability to remain calm when others lose control, to walk away when respect disappears, and to stand firm when life tries to bend them. That's the kind of psychological power that cannot be taken away because it comes from within. Most people will continue living exactly as they always have. They'll keep chasing validation, explaining themselves to people who have already made up their minds, and sacrificing their peace to keep others comfortable. But the few who choose a different path will discover something extraordinary. They will learn that emotional detachment is freedom, that strategic silence is influence, and that the Machiavellian mindset is not about controlling others, it's about refusing to be controlled by them. So now the real question isn't whether these principles work. The real question is whether you're willing to apply them. Which part of your life is still controlled by the need for approval? Who are you giving energy to that no longer deserves it? What would change if you stopped seeking validation and started building yourself instead? And perhaps the most important question of all: what version of yourself are you protecting by refusing to evolve? Remember, every powerful transformation begins with a decision to stop being easy to manipulate, a decision to stop surrendering your value to people who don't appreciate it, a decision to become the kind of person who remains calm in chaos, focused under pressure, and unshaken by the opinions of the crowd. If this message resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. What was the most powerful lesson you learned today? Which principle are you going to apply first? I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you want to continue exploring psychology, Machiavelli, self-mastery, strategic silence, emotional detachment, and the hidden dynamics of psychological power, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video, and activate notifications so you never miss the next lesson. The world tests everyone. The question is, when your test arrives, will you be ready?